Hello, hello. Give us just a minute and we will get started. We're having some backstage technical difficulties just trying to get Elizabeth in here. So please, everyone, enjoy an extra sip of coffee while we get this figured out and set up. Drop a message in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from, and we will get started in just a minute. There we go. I can see you. Just have to get you unmuted.
There we go. Okay.
We made it.
Righto.
Isn't technology fantastic?
Yeah.
Well, with that out of the way then, welcome everyone to get ready with us for the fall 2025 term. Over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the best practices to get a higher data fidelity from your LMS by using some of the settings that you may have overlooked or may only partially use when you're setting up your courses and your terms and enrollments and things like that. Or maybe you do use some of these features and don't really understand why they're important. So we're going to discuss that along with some of the ways that IntelliBoard can report on this data and really give you the clearest picture of what's happening in your school. So with that out of the way, really quick, I'm Brendan Toohey. I'm an instructional designer with IntelliBoard, and I'll be your host this morning. And with me, finally, is my wonderful colleague, Elizabeth Dalton, who I will let introduce herself right after I say that she is just an expert and fount of knowledge on LMSs and their operation and the data that we get out of them. So Elizabeth, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm great. I am absolutely fine. Now that we have managed to pay off the internet ferries and get our system back up. I'm Elizabeth Dalton, Learning and Development Analyst here at IntelliBoard. former employee of Moodle HQ, former administrator of Moodle systems, Blackboard systems, other LMS systems that nobody's ever heard of. Long history in online learning and trying to squeeze absolutely the most out of a learning management system and other educational technology. And that's what we're going to try to share with you today.
Cool. So we have our agenda on the screen. I think all of you have had a second to look that over. So let's kick it off here. And coming up first is start and end dates. And this seems pretty straightforward, but they aren't required to launch a course or most other things in the LMS. So Elizabeth, could you talk about like what benefits we'll gain from using clearly defined start and end dates for courses or enrollments or activities?
Yeah, so we're going to talk first about courses and enrollments. So most of the learning management systems don't require you to enter start and end dates for courses. And entering these honestly has some side effects that you may be wanting to step around. So for example, if a course has a start date, learners typically won't see that course before the start date. They won't see it in their list of courses. They may not be able to enter the course. And similarly, if the course has an end date, that may cause that course to vanish from everybody's list, or they may see it, but they may not be able to go into it. And that may be something that you're trying to avoid. But let's talk a little bit about the advantages. So if you have a start or end date for either the course or the learner, or in the case of Canvas, the term, that helps with calculating how much time is left in the course, how much time has been since the learner was expected to start the course, and that lets us calculate for you a number of things. So one of the things that people are very conscious of is Title IV reporting for financial aid. And having a good start date can help with that. Now, if you have both a start and an end date, we can automatically do something for you called pacing, where we look at the total number of activities a learner is expected to complete and the amount of time they're expected to complete those activities in, and we do a little math for you and tell you if the learner is on pace or off pace. And this can be done even in cases where you have rolling start and end dates for the course, but you have individual start and end dates for the learner, enrollment start and end dates. And if you're not sure which to use or which your system has available, we're happy to help with that. But also be aware that we have an extra value that we calculate called the expected start and expected end for each learner in each course. And we automatically check to see what your learning management system supports and what you've actually used. And we look for the best date to be able to say when this learner was expected to start and when they're expected to complete a given course. So we'll do a lot of this work for you if you have any start date and any end date filled in. And again, reach out to helpdesk@intelliboard.net if you'd like to know more about what your options are with your particular LMS, and we can even give you some hints on where to edit those in your LMS.
Great. So moving on to topic number 2, we have be descriptive. And we'll start this off with a screenshot from one of IntelliBoard's activity reports where we see the same activity title is reused across several courses. So that can get really confusing if you're an instructor who has multiple sections, different courses that you're covering. But I imagine that there's some other benefits to being specific with not just the titles of activities, but other descriptors in the LMS as well.
Yeah, there's a Dr. Seuss book that I like to quote here. Did I ever tell you about Mrs. McCabe who had 23 sons and named them all Dave? So she did, and then when she called for Dave, all of them came and she couldn't tell them apart. That's the problem here. So it's common in some cases for an instructor to name things assignment 1 or week 1 discussion or things like that. And for an instructor teaching one course, that may look fine. If a learner's only in one course, that may look fine, but we like to be able to provide reports to instructors who are teaching multiple courses, to learners who are in multiple courses, and then to other people like advisors who have many learners in many courses. And so making those names just a little bit more descriptive helps make communication more clear between all of these different roles within the learning process. So we like to recommend that instead of something like, here we see first assignment with rubric, call this persuasive essay with rubric, or essay, economic effects of World War II, or whatever. Think about how it will look in a list with other activities, not in the course. And even if you're in the course, this helps learners who are looking ahead at the course page to kind of understand what the expectations are going to be. And it is super helpful to others like advisors. This also applies to course names, categories, everything with names. Let's say you have a top level category with a term name, and under that, under that you have department names like Fall 25, and then mathematics. It will help make sense of your reports if you name that subcategory or subaccount Mathematics Fall 2025. So if the category name appears by itself in a report, everyone will know what they are looking at. So sometimes you need to keep the names the same. For example, a course name, you want to keep that course name consistent, but there's another field. In Moodle, it's called the course ID number. In Canvas, there's an SIS ID. You can put more detail in that field and show that separately in a report. And in many cases, you can use this to tie the course to an external system like the SIS. So this is where you can put the course SIS ID in what we call metadata. That's another field that's separate from the name. And that helps you see how that item, course, activity, category relates to items that you have in other systems. It can also help you group items. So if you want to show all of the activities that are related to, let's say, multiplication, you're teaching arithmetic, or I usually draw my examples from statistics because that's what I used to teach. So, t-tests. Then if you put a tag or metadata on each of those activities, you can filter and see all the activities and resources that are related to that particular concept, and that can be really helpful. We're going to look at this again when we come back to competencies a little bit later in this webinar.
Great. So kind of following on from this and what we talked about with setting the start and end dates, we're going to talk about submission tracking. And this is partially about setting those dates, but there's some other nifty things that you can do with submissions in the LMS. So how can we use activity submissions or assignment submissions to give us a better understanding of student progress?
Yeah, there's a lot you can do here. And coming back to dates again, one of the most significant helpful things you can do is put due dates or start dates and end dates, depending on what your LMS supports, into each assignment. This does a number of things. First of all, it helps clarify to learners what their expectations are, and it can automatically set values to 0 if a learner misses a deadline, which may or may not be what you want. Usually it's an option that you can set. But even more than that, we can help provide reports about learners who have missed due dates, either didn't hand something in before due date and can't hand it in now, or handed it in late. This is often really significant data for predicting learner risk. And we can only do it if we know when they should have handed something in. So this is a very high value for effort kind of thing to do, putting these due dates in. There are other options that you can use. In Moodle, there's an expect completed by option that can be used for activity types that don't even support due dates. And what we can also do is use this to see if learners have submitted something before the Pell Grant recalculation date, which is what you need for Title IV reporting. So by putting in these due dates, an instructor or a course developer is being mindful of those Title IV reporting deadlines and making sure that there's at least one activity that comes in before then. So this just has a lot of benefits. This is one of the strongest things you can do if you pick just one thing to do here, other than the thing at the end. We'll get to that in a minute.
And we can
So,
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we can also use this for rolling enrollments, right? So if we
Yeah.
work with some corporations as well who maybe do training. It's not just the start of the term per se, but it's consistently new students coming in.
Yeah,
Students.
and you may also have a learner that you allow to submit something late because they had, the usual sorts of excuses that learners may provide, or because they made a good faith effort and you want them to redo an assignment and pass it in late for, to improve their grade, whatever it is. So most of the learning management systems allow you to reset your deadlines for one learner at a time as well. So this is another feature that you can use to allow some grace to learners or to make the dates specific to learners who have all started a course at different times. So again, LMSs have gotten very sophisticated, and they will let you make these kinds of individual changes if that's what you need to administer your class.
And speaking of those kinds of options for individual learners, there's also some things that we can do with optional content as well, right?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll have something in your course that's either extra credit or optional. It's a resource. Maybe you've got resources in different formats that you want people to be able to look at. And, they're going to look or not. You don't need to track completion for those. So what you can do in this case is decide whether to turn on completion tracking or include it in the requirements for module or course completion, depending on the LMS. We automatically include items that either have a completion tracking enabled or are included in module or course completion in required for completion count. We automatically calculate that for you. So when you look at what percentage of required items a learner has completed, which we call course progress, we take that into account. So if you take that extra step and mark the items that have to be completed with either in Moodle completion settings or course completion settings or in Canvas module completion requirements. There are different ways to do it in different learning management systems. And again, we're happy to help you know which one is right for you. Those let you see clearly, and this is part of the pacing report that we looked at earlier, they let you see clearly how far a learner has gotten against the expectations. So these are all ways of making your expectations of your learners more clear, which helps them and helps an instructor, an advisor, anyone else who needs to be able to look and see how the learner is doing because the expectations are clearly laid out in the course.
So speaking of, or jumping off from that really, in the optional content and learner submissions and uh, tracking their progress, we've talked with a lot of people over the years who maybe partially use the LMS gradebook. Maybe they only use it for content that's already in the LMS. And it could just be old habits die hard if you have your Excel sheet set up, if you want to use certain weighting or calculations. But why should instructors aim to get all of the learners' grades into the gradebook? And what advantages would that provide?
It makes a single source for everybody to look at, even if the content isn't in the LMS. And there are a lot of reasons that might be the case. This could be an actual classroom class, face-to-face class that just has an LMS shell just to store some extra files. It could be a hybrid class where some of the activities are classroom presentations that, naturally they don't appear automatically in the grade book. But think of it this way, as an instructor, we have to keep our grade book somewhere. We might as well use a tool that's already set up for us. Take a little bit of time to learn that tool. It's not that much different from the kinds of spreadsheet methods that we're all used to. And it puts it in a place where learners can see how they're doing. which is just really important. The number one question we get from learners is, how am I doing in this course? What do I need to do to succeed in this course? What's my grade probably going to be in this course? Now, we do know that some instructors have their own calculations that they want to use. The final grade that goes to the SIS is what the instructor says it is, not something that's calculated by the LMS. In an LMS, you can actually disable that final grade calculation if you don't want to show it. So you can show all of the individual grades, which still gives everyone, the learner, the advisor, a parent, if the learner is a minor, everybody a view of how the learner is doing, and we'll help you get those grades in and keep them up to date. We have a needs grading report. And again, if you put the activities in, give them deadlines, the needs grading system will help you know these are the grades that I need to enter right now, keep them all organized for you. And then if you need to export them and do some calculations before you hand in your final grades to the SIS, you can do that. That's fine. But let's just have one place where we store these grades and everybody knows that's where we can look. And it might as well be the LMS because all the right people have access to it.
And touching on something that you mentioned from what we offer with IntelliBoard in our needs grading report is that report draws from every course that you're in charge of as an instructor, which is just, it's really cool. I've seen how things can get very confusing in the LMS, and you've got notifications, you've got an inbox that's just full of stuff that is distracting you from actually getting grades in all your individual courses done. And we can just put this all in one location for you with a link to that assignment directly. And just one of the cool features that I love to see and I love to tell people about with IntelliBoard.
I've got to say, if you're teaching more than one class, having that needs grading report that just shows you, I mean, the number one question we have from instructors is, what do I need to do next? And having that needs grading report that just shows you all the stuff coming in from here, there, everywhere, and getting it into one place so you can just go down the list, get your grades done, and know that you're on top of the work, know that you're giving that feedback back to learners that is so important to help them learn. And that all comes from having your gradebook filled in, knowing what the activities are. Now, if you're thinking about, well, I have these activities in class, my learners don't hand them in online. Here's a little trick that you can use. Make a little quiz for your learners where they rate themselves on an activity that they did in class. And then you go in, you keep all of their ratings in their quiz questions or using a survey, and you enter a final grade. So it's a way to make your grading process a little more collaborative. It gives you a manual item in your gradebook. It gives you a reminder that this thing needs to be graded, and it gives your learners early insight into how they're doing. We're going to talk about things like that in a future webinar about pedagogy, but I just wanted to kind of slip out that little hint here.
And following on from grading, we're going to touch on rubrics and competencies. And I know that these are different, but very closely related, both frameworks that can serve similar functions in course setup and outcome tracking. So we've seen some clients of ours use these extensively and others only use them sparingly. So what makes them useful to set up in an LMS and try to deploy across all your courses?
These are definitely more advanced features. Not everybody will have the capacity or the need for these, but if you've done the other things that we've talked about in this webinar and you're looking for more ways to squeeze data out of your LMS that you can use to help the learning process, these are two tools that can be very helpful. So let's talk about the relationship between the two of them. Competencies use rubrics. Not all rubrics are related to competency. So let's talk about rubrics first. And if there are any instructors on the call with us today, you know what these are. You just may not know how to set them up in the LMS, but a rubric has a list of criteria and then description of levels for each of those criteria that let you say, this project, this piece of work, this presentation, this work that was done by this learner has achieved this level of each of those criteria. And if you're using an LMS with a rubric setup, It will automatically do the math for you and add up all the points. This provides a lot of benefits. In the case of instructors, it can make grading a lot faster, and you can feel confident that you're grading consistently. In the case of learners, they're getting more feedback about what they did well and where they need to improve in their work. It's also helpful for other people who are trying to help those learners in their learning process. So this could be an advisor. If you're talking about a minor, it could be a parent, a mentor, anybody who's trying to work with the learner and wants to be able to see, well, what were the criteria? Why was this graded the way it was? And it just makes things very consistent. It also can help protect the institution. If somebody comes and says, well, I had a harder instructor, my instructor doesn't grade fairly. And we all know instructors say, I grade fair but tough, right? Well, this helps us prove it. If an institution needs to pull the rubric entries from all the instructors across one common course, let's say Calculus 1, and show that all the instructors are grading at approximately the same level, given the same level of ability for the students, that's a defense. So it just helps everybody feel more confident that the grading is consistent, and it gives more detail. It's a very efficient way of grading.
I'm still salty over a bad grade that I got on a Maurice Ravel presentation back in the day. So if we had a
Mhm.
rubric, then it would have, I wouldn't have remembered it. I guess I'd have forgotten about it 15 years ago.
There you go. Now, the other thing that I like to do, and again, this is like a hint towards a pedagogy one that we're going to do in the future, is I like to give the rubrics to the students ahead of time, and I actually have them rate their own work before they hand it in. This caused a huge improvement in quality of work when I started doing this. So again, that's a sneak peek to another webinar. Now let's talk about competencies. Competencies use rubrics. Not all rubrics are related to competencies. We've probably all heard of the Common Core competency framework in the United States. So that's a framework, a list of competencies, descriptions, levels for grades K through 12. There is another rubric, competency framework that works very well at the higher education level for general education requirements, and that's the AACU value rubric. And I can drop that into the chat in case anybody's interested in looking at that. It's a really interesting tool. And what these tools let you do is say, not just within one course, but across multiple courses. How is the learner doing against a fixed standard? And how are all of our learners doing against specific standards? Which of our courses are meant to address each of these standards? Do we have competency coverage for the whole competency framework across the courses in our curriculum? Are we completely covered? And if we want to know which learners are doing really well on specific competencies, we can do that. And we've helped clients with their auditing process, preparing for accreditation for their curriculum review by helping them line up all the courses that address different competencies and even specific activities that address specific competency levels. This is also really useful in cases where you're not giving grades, you're only giving competencies. Where competencies are part of competency-based learning, this is especially common in workforce preparation, where the point isn't to get an average grade, B or better, where you can miss something important, but you still got a B, so you pass the course. Maybe you have a series of competencies, and all of these are required at a basic level to pass the course. So those are other tools that we can use. We should really have a separate webinar specifically about competency-based education and how we can help with that.
We've spent a lot of time developing those sorts of reporting tools over the past few years, as I have worked with you extensively on it in that time. So
Mhm.
would love to discuss that more. So speaking of standards, this is a slightly different kind of standard, I suppose. But we've talked about the LMS a bunch and the features and settings that are in those platforms that can help track student engagement. But a lot of course content comes from outside the LMS. It's sources that weren't created with education in mind necessarily. It's just YouTube links or a PDF article uploaded somewhere. And so it gets really difficult to track engagement, if whether it's time spent or just even looking at whether a learner's access that content at all. You know, you can track the click from the LMS to the external source in some cases, but are there ways to track this external content in the LMS still?
Absolutely. And that's what these technology standards are for. And the three that we're going to talk about briefly here are LTI, SCORM, and XAPI. And we often get questions from clients wanting to know, I use this external tool. Can you track it? Can you report on it? Can you help me get more data? We can always tell if you're using one of these standards, we can tell if the learner has gone there. We can tell if they've satisfied completion requirements. We can probably get a grade back depending on the version of the standard that they support. So these are very helpful standards to look for. And if you're considering some kind of external content provider, look for these standards, because otherwise the content provider may have all your data locked up and we can't tell. And you can't tell easily how well a learner is doing with that content. So these are really important standards. LTI is the most commonly used. It's called Learning Tools Interoperability, usually used for external quizzes, some electronic textbooks, some simulations, lab work simulations, many other kinds of engaging content. LTI will track and return completion status and grade. It acts as a single sign-on to the external service, so you don't have to go and set everybody up separately. And it records when the activity was launched as a participation. So we count that as the higher level of engagement participation, not just a view, not like just clicking on a link and viewing a video. We can track participation. If the learner goes to a separate site, you may not be able to track time spent. So if you have the option to show the LTI content within the LMS, we will probably be able to get time spent from that. SCORM is another common standard made by a different organization, Shareable Content Object Reference Module. It's just a way of structuring content with additional engagement and tracking. The content objects can be stored within the LMS, or you can connect to an external provider like SCORM Cloud. And SCORM can actually track the number of pages that were viewed, even the questions that a learner got correct and incorrect, but that data isn't always passed back to the LMS where we can get to it for more reporting. If you have complex SCORM activities that you need to do reporting on, please contact us and we can work with you to see how accessible that data is and how we could incorporate it. And the last example that I want to mention is XAPI, which is intended as sort of a futuristic, maybe replacement for both LTI and SCORM. And although it's been around for 20 years plus, we haven't seen a lot of uptake yet, except in certain mostly military training kinds of environments, but we're getting more questions about it now. XAPI not only sends the learner to another piece of client and launch content and launches it, but it can hand back more information, like a full log of information about what the learner did there that can be stored within the LMS or within a separate kind of tool called an LRS. And we have proof of concepts, proof of technology for this kind of content, but we haven't worked with a client yet who's really using it and has a lot of data for us to look at. So if out there in the audience, you are such a client and you have been using XAPI content and you would like to work with us to help us complete this feature, we would love to hear from you. Please do reach out to us. Now, here's a cool trick. Even passive content, like a video, and people think of a video as being engaging, but really you click play and then what happens? You can walk away and get a cup of coffee or whatever. You can report on engagement with passive content like a video or an article if you wrap it using one of these standards. So a good example is H5P. H5P lets you take something like a video or a document and embed it in an LTI activity. And then when you launch it, there are completion criteria. There can even be a grade. There can be a quiz embedded in this content that will return a result back through LTI. So this is a really good way to be able to track more about how your learners are engaging with the content.
Great, so exciting stuff there. And moving on to what is our final set of slides. This one's interesting because we've been talking a lot about setting things to get data from the LMS, and now we're going to talk about leaving them alone. And I've personally got a pretty itchy trigger finger when it comes to deleting things. Like, I'm not a pack rat. So if we know a course isn't being offered, or if a student has maybe permanently left the school, why wouldn't we try to delete them from the LMS? Why would we save that data?
Well, of course, I should confess, I'm the opposite of Brendan. I am a pack rat. I'm the kind of person who always has a bit of leftover string in her pockets, which I use for various things. Everything I think of, it's just, I grew up in a family where we saved things and made things and whatever. But philosophy aside, IntelliBoard follows the source system in terms of retaining data. We have to do this to be compliant with FERPA, GDPR. If a learner requests that their data is deleted from the LMS, we respond by deleting within IntelliBoard. We follow the LMS. And when data is deleted, we lose all records, including who deleted the data. So deleting things is risky. Enrollments are a special category. You don't want to delete the course. You don't want to delete the learner, but maybe you're thinking, well, the student isn't enrolled in this course anymore. Can I just delete the enrollment? Can I delete this learner from this course? We advise you not to do that. And here's why. Sometimes learners come back. Let's say that a learner is dropped from a course because they did not pay their bill. And then a week later, they resolve their bill. Their financial aid comes through. And this is not a made-up example. This has happened. The learner gets added back into the course, but their enrollment was deleted. That means all of their previous work is gone. Any assignments they handed in, any grades that they achieved, gone, and they're starting over again. And now you're calling your LMS administrator and saying, can we restore an earlier version of the course or something like that? And it's just a nightmare all around. Instead, suspend the learner. There are tools for this in every LMS. You can make the learner inactive, hidden, or suspended. The instructor won't see them. The other learners won't see them. The learner won't be able to log into the course until or if the situation is resolved, but their work stays. This is very important if you have an audit later, which can happen as part of your Title IV funding, as part of accreditation. There are a number of reasons that somebody may come back and say, why was this learner dropped from this course? And you need to be able to show because they were inactive. See, their enrollment is still in the course, and you can see they didn't do anything. Or because they didn't pay, but we do have how much activity they had up till that point, and we can show that we gave them a refund or something like that. Whatever it is, keeping that learner enrollment record in your LMS means that we keep it in the reporting system here at IntelliBoard, and it protects you over the long run. It means that the data is available to analyze, to understand why learners drop from courses. And obviously, if a course itself is canceled and the instructor has done work in the course, you want to be able to recover that for a future section. So don't delete the courses either. You can hide them, you can make them, disabled, you can set their end dates to today. There are a lot of different things you can do, but this is where being a pack rat kind of helps. Keep the records. Consider these potentially legal records. And the more data that you keep, the stronger your position is if you need to report later on what happened. Enough
Great.
said.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty solid list of items that you can use to hopefully bring better data reporting out of your LMS, or just make life easier for the people who are using the LMS. Elizabeth, thank you so much for gracing us with your knowledge and your expertise. It's been a joy listening to you describe how all of this is so important to not only our clients but people outside who just may be interested in getting the most from the learning management system and supporting the people who use it regularly.
Always a pleasure to chat with you, Brendan. Do we have any questions from any of our attenders?
We'll give it another minute or so, but of course, if you do have any questions, reach out to helpdesk@intelliboard.net. If you're watching this and you aren't an IntelliBoard subscriber, schedule a demo. We have a nice QR code here you can follow, or you can just visit our site at intelliboard.net, or check out things like our knowledge base or even our YouTube video library to get more of those ideas for not only how IntelliBoard and our reporting can help, but of course, how you can set things up for better data in the future.
Well, we really appreciate everyone who has joined us today for this discussion. And of course, this is recorded and will be sent out to others who registered but weren't able to make it. And we're into fall. New
So good
terms
luck.
are starting.
Yeah. So good luck with the new semester, everyone, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. All right. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.